Growing up, I loved to play JRPGs. Uh, I made sure to buy them when they came out. I was just really into the stuff. Um, but these days, I'm not really anymore. Definitely not like I used to. So I kind of wanted to explore what that is. I have a few criticism, but first of all, I just want to mention that what I'm talking about here are simply preferences I have for stories, and preferences are just that. A character or a story isn't bad because it doesn't align with a preference of mine. Example, I don't like musicals. I don't like the genre. It doesn't mean musicals are bad stories. It just means I don't enjoy that presentation. With that out of the way, let's begin. My first experiences with these games began all the way back in 1989 when my dad bought a game called Dragon Warrior. It's a simplistic game that boiled down to attack, attack, heal, attack, rinse and repeat. But it was different than anything else on the market. It had exploration, story elements, and then sometime I'd conquered the game and I was hooked. My family ended up getting all the NES Dragon Warrior games and we loved them all, but I was about to discover something even better. Final Fantasy VI. Outside of Japan, Final Fantasy VI was released as Final Fantasy III, as a few of the games in between the first and the sixth did not get a North American release. I remember that as I started to play the game, I thought, whoa, there's a story. Yeah, Dragon Warrior had a story. There were small narratives within the game itself, good ones too, but the main plot was always something like, hey, this evil creature is going to destroy the world just because, and only I can stop them. The characters were special too. There were a lot of them. They all had their own stories and quests, and if there was a character you and your friends openly wished you could send on a suicide mission, I'm looking at you, Gal, you could tuck them away in the balls of the airship and just forget about them. Side note, my friend Scott and I always did whatever we could to kill Gal. Before you recruit him and move the story along, you have a random battle with him, and you're supposed to give him like that tasty treat or dried meat, whatever it was. But instead, we'd always have Sabin use his suplex move on Gal. Oh, so satisfying. And second side note, the artwork that came with the Final Fantasy VI is still my favorite by a large margin. Well, anyways, I backtracked and played the older Final Fantasy games. I loved them too. And then came Final Fantasy VII. It would become the most famous and most popular Final Fantasy game of all time. I think it still is. Interestingly enough, it would also be the first Final Fantasy game not to be on a Nintendo console. This alone was a deciding factor for me to get the Sony PlayStation instead of the Nintendo console, the new Nintendo console. But as much as I enjoyed it and as much time as I played Final Fantasy VII, which was a lot, I began to notice things that didn't really seem right. The main character, Cloud, is this super elite combat soldier who happens to be a teenager. I was 14 or 15 when the game came out, and even then I thought it was odd that essentially a high school senior was an experienced super soldier. But outside of this admittedly minor flaw, I love the game. Plus there's Tifa, so, bonus. Final Fantasy VIII came out and I enjoyed it, but now it was becoming quite noticeable. The game was becoming, younger. Almost every character in your squad was a high schooler in appearance and behavior. And despite being in high school myself, I couldn't really accept the idea of whiny 14 to 18-year-olds being so awesome. Final Fantasy VIII is kind of what destroyed my suspension of disbelief in it all. And it pays to point out around this time that JRPGs were getting more cute and youth-oriented with each installment. Western RPGs began popping up. There were a few released before, but the first big one I remember was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. And Knights of the Republic was a improvement in every way over its Japanese brethren. There were two improvements that were the most noticeable, though, writing and voice acting. Writing in JRPGs was never bad, but it was never great either. Dialogue often the weakest aspect. And okay dialogue is okay, but when it's next to something that's good, it looks worse in comparison. Voice acting wise, games coming out of Japan were never done well. And some of the worst offenders were from Tri-Ace's Star Ocean series. Oh, and don't forget Shenmue.
I see. But Itoi-san, how do you know about the three blades?
Years ago, I was Chinese. Now, I'm a naturalized Japanese. In China, my name was Su Jianmen.
Is that so? Thank you.
KOTOR is the first game I can remember playing where you could tell money and talent was put into voice acting, and it really aided in immersion. I finally wrote off the Final Fantasy series after the 9th installment. JRPGs were going in a direction I just couldn't find engaging anymore. And that, again, I want to bring this up. This isn't really a criticism of JRPGs. It's not done poorly or wrong. It's just simply preferences I have with story. Okay, I mean, the dialogue stuff is definitely criticism because that was usually below average. But, you know, anyways, one of the biggest problems Japanese developers face is their base, especially in Japan, wants the cute and cuddly, quirky designs. Phasing that stuff out would mean a loss of dedicated consumers, and on the other hand, developers know that group is a shrinking portion of the market. The worst part for me is I know a lot of those games are good and enjoyable, but the characters and how they react to different things are so off-putting. I don't want to play a game where a group of 15-year-olds with big crazy hair and who are socially awkward join forces and save the day. And not personally knowing anyone who is excited about the new Final Fantasy release is one of the more radical gaming changes in my life. But that's how the world works, you know. If you're not careful or not paying attention, someone will come along and do what you're doing better and cheaper. Right, SimCity? That's all I got today, though. If you're still around, thank you for watching, and check out these videos linked right over here. Bye.